before I do this introduction speech and what goes with it, I just want to remind judges that are here, during the 15-minute prep that the teams are going to have in a short while, if they can come and tell us, if they can recall off the top of their heads, which are their novice speakers, because none of them were mentioned in the emails or in the registration forms given to us. And because we have a novice speaker award, it's the small one over there, we want to give it to someone and we want to do so fairly.
Can you find a novice speaker for your tournament?
The first time someone takes part in a tournament ever. Yes. Alright, so that's your novice speaker. So, congratulations. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope it's been fun. I am very glad that it's not raining anymore. It was raining horribly yesterday. We really wanted to do it out here. Now, before I announce the teams, I want our club advisor, the guy that's complaining about the water here, come over here. Oi. Dr. Christoph Gassenschmidt, he's advisor of the debate club. Our new advisor, we love him very much. So, say a few words of wisdom.
Yeah, I had the pleasure to join this wonderful club in September. In August, I had no clue what debate is about. Today was my 4th tournament, and it's getting better and better. It was fantastic today and yesterday to see you debating. And I thank you very much that you all came, and I hope you come again. Okay? Good luck to the final.
He's my history professor. If I gave him a paper that small, he wouldn't pass me. That's definite. All right. So, going on, without any further ado, I know this was a small tournament. I hope you all had a lot of fun, though. I will be announcing the teams that made it in each respective room. I will start with the 7th auditorium. So, in the 7th auditorium, the decision was unanimous. It was rather quick. The debate was good. We really very much all enjoyed it. And the teams that made it are Britannica, Ekpedeftiria, Zubulidis, Mr. Lekas and Mr. Saris. Congratulations. And the second team that makes it from that room, she's adopted by Estafiu Squared. I don't know if you guys related at all. Oh, pretty cool. Well done. Now, in the 6th level auditorium, I was told the decision was split. I could tell because it took them double the time it took us to come up with a decision. And the teams that made it are Tsipras, Mr. Evans, and Mr. Paradisiadis. Congratulations, guys. And the second team that made it are Pink Fluffy Unicorns, Mr. Moschopoulos and Mrs. Rubulaki. Congratulations, guys. And next up, the judges that made the break. Oh wow, look at that. Me. Second up, Kalina, Mrs. Peters, Mrs. Damianaki, and Mrs. Voitanko. Congratulations. You will all be judging in the final right here. And now for the final motion. I hope you guys enjoyed. It's a big topic. It's a used up motion.
Size first.
Excuse me?
Size first.
I think that's a good idea. Now, do you have the papers ready? All right. Can I have a representative from each team come down? So I need a representative from Ekpedeftiria Zubulidis. She's adopted. Tsipras and Pink Fluffy Unicorns. One representative from each. Give us a moment. So you've got your team is opening up. Closing government, your team is? She's adopted closing government. Opening up for the Feria Zubulidis, right?
Thank you, Maria.
And opening government. Tsipras and closing opposition, fluffy unicorns that are pink. All right. So now for the motion. I can't write this up anywhere, so I'm going to do this slowly. This house believes in a philosopher dictator over a tyrannical democracy. So, I'm repeating it again. What, am I saying doing something wrong? You guys are laughing. So, this house believes in a philosopher dictator over a tyrannical democracy. All right, do we have that down? The time is 6:50, and you'll be called back at 7:05 sharp to debate. Good luck, guys. Congratulations to all the teams for making it out here. The motion today is this house believes in a philosopher king over a tyrannical democracy. Oh, sorry.
Dictator.
Dictator. Scott, have it. Well, that's the motion. You guys know it. All right. Now, calling to the stage the Prime Minister to open the case for the government.
Awkwardly holding a paper down during my speech. Sorry about that. So, we'll give my time. Sorry about that. Thanks a lot. All right. Mr. Speaker, it's a great honor to be standing in an ancient Greek-style amphitheater to support the sorts of things that Plato supported when he talked about philosopher kings. We have a very serious case for you today. In the context of 1/3 of Greeks living under the poverty line, of Greeks having been reduced to the level of inequality where some of them wear polo shirts while others wear cargo shirts and torn sweaters, we think there's a problem, and we have a very simple solution for it. What do we think should be done in order for Greece to come out of its crisis? We think we need to have a dictator who's going to implement policies that benefit the people. How are we going to select this individual? We think there are 3 fundamental criteria. The first of these is his willingness to default on debt, and secondly, to have a return to the drachma. Thirdly, we think importance of popular appeal, such as physical attractiveness, is extremely important. You guessed it, it's Tsipras. He's going to stay for about 10 years to implement policies that will bring back equity to Greek society and to promote the ability of our country to come out of the rut in which it is. 3 points I want to talk about in my speech. First off, I want to talk to you about why this creates a lot of economic benefit in the short term to default and why we think that's the only option. Secondly, why in the longer term, we think we are able to have a better Greek economy in terms of how it progresses. Thirdly, I'm going to talk to you about the appeal of democratic institutions and why we think they're better in the longer term. It's slightly counterintuitive, you're going to like it. So, that being said, on to the first one about the short term and the sorts of things that occur in policy. I have a very simple question for you. Do you know the memorandum? Because you pretty much should, right? There's a policy right now in Greece being implemented, a set of policies rather, in which the Greek state is implementing consistent force of austerity. What has been the result of that? Well, we had a budget deficit of 12%. Now we have a budget deficit of 7%. That's a 5% decrease, despite the massive amounts of poverty and destruction this sort of thing has caused on the people of Greece and the massive inequity that we think is problematic. So, what do we think default does in this particular instance? Well, first off, we think that you don't have to pay interest for the sorts of loans that you have, which means that the budget deficit Greece currently has largely comprises of that interest, which means, well, it means that our budget deficit according to most figures, goes down to about 1%. Now that we have someone who's able to implement austerity and get us back into a path without having to worry about massive amounts of pressure and maybe large amounts of riots and that sort of thing and elections harming him, we think we're able to progress in this way. Secondly, we think that this current policy, necessarily undermines and denies basic reality. We think Greece, with a budget deficit of 160% of its GDP, is just something that we cannot pay in the short or longer term. We think given the fact that all this massive austerity still has us borrowing more and more money every year is problematic. So what do we think would be done in this particular instance? We would have a state which cannot pay its debt, as other states have done, in the short term, default on that debt, and have the ability to progress in the longer term. I think policies, such as growth policies, can be implemented at the same time without having to implement all this sort of thing. We think people in Greece are made better off when they don't have to pay this massive amount of interest. So secondly, I want to talk to you about the longer term and why we think that's better. Here's where the return to the drachma comes in. First off, we would like to point out the drachma will immediately be devalued. First off, what happens to the people who have deposits in Greece? Well, first off, these people have been withdrawing their deposits anyway. This week alone, Mr. Speaker, 1.5 billion has been withdrawn from Greek banks. People are already anticipating the return to the drachma, and we think this is going to continue. We need to act now with this policy in order to prevent more people doing that. We think whether or not we return to the drachma now or in 5 years makes a lot of difference because the Greek banks will have a massive run on them, and that's problematic. Yeah.
Given that some 80% of Greek people have said that they want to stay within the Eurozone, how do you justify overruling their autonomy and their decisions?
We have a dictator. Okay. That's one. Secondly, we think it's just better for them in the longer term. Thirdly, we just dispute the accuracy of that. So, why did they vote for Tsipras? All right. So, secondly, in terms of having, so what does this mean? When Greece devalues this sort of thing, it means that it has cheaper exports. What does this imply for Greece in the longer term? It means that it can revive its industries. It means that it can compete on an international scale. Like Germany between 2000 and 2009 increased its exports by 60%, Mr. Speaker, while Greece's local industries were destroyed. In the longer term, we're able to create cheaper exports which Germans can buy. The second and most important point is that we think the sorts of exports that Greece can provide a very important service to the rest of the world. We think the rest of the world has an absolute inalienable right to cheap feta, cheap olive oil, and all these sorts of things. We think currently the euro denies all these rights to these individuals. We think that is a disgrace. So, on to appeal and why that we think that's important. First off, basic polls are done. If we look at the, Kennedy versus Nixon. People prefer people who are attractive because they bring more legitimacy to those individuals. Many studies have been done that people trust people who are more attractive. We think in the short term, an individual who is hot, like Tsipras, is more likely to be trusted by the people of Greece and the people of the world as someone who's in charge of that state. We think that increases more legitimacy. We think Madame Merkel, as Tsipras likes to call her, probably hasn't had sex in a very long time. So we think that says that we can have Tsipras go on to her, something like that, and have her commit all these concessions. We think that's an incredibly important benefit on our side of the house that we otherwise would not have with a fat, ugly old man like Karamanlis or someone like that. We just don't like that, Mr. Speaker. Plus, what's the other option? I don't know, Venizelos or something. All right, so seriously. Democratic institutions currently are being delegitimized. Why? One, because they're failing to deal with this sort of problem. Two, because look at the massive protests that occur in Greece, because they're failing in this particular respect. The fact that people don't just trust the democratic process is problematic. So what's going on? We're electing a government to a state apparatus that is totally delegitimized, which means that those institutions in the longer term don't have the sort of appeal that they otherwise would have. So what does this imply for the people once we do go through all this austerity? One, it means that these people are pressured by people like bankers to not go and change the currency and deposits and that sort of thing. We think the fact that Greeks bailed out banks and never got shares in those banks is problematic. We think Tsipras has a specific policy to change that, and we think these things are necessary. We think massive amounts of lobbying do not exist on our side of the house because these people do not have to face continuous election with which they then have to gain money from bankers and submit to every one of their requests. We think we fundamentally change that and allow the Greek state to promote equity for all of its people. But more importantly, we think in the longer term, once we have institutions dealt with all the problems, we're able to have genuine democratic discourse within Greece and not the loss of legitimacy that we currently see in these institutions. Once the return to democracy happens, it's going to be a red sort of democracy, like my shirt today. But we think more importantly, these people are going to have a fair, equitable society in which they can all live at the same time without the massive problems that we have. Less protests, more legitimacy, a better economy, better lives. We're so happy to propose.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for that speech. Now,
please, to open the case for the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to concede that Mr. Tsipras is by far the hottest candidate out there. We think his looks are pretty much unrivaled, not only in Greece, but in the entire European and world domain. However, despite that, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to say that about 70% of Greece thinks that looks don't really matter as much as brains, and it's ironic that we're here in a debate tournament to kind of advocate these kinds of things. Well, I think it was Aristotle who talked about the good life. And given that they're the philosopher dictators, it's funny that they want to kind of return us to a level of poverty that we haven't seen in the last 2,000 years. That's what voting for someone who has no plans does, only because he's beautiful. That's what voting for Tsipras achieves. That's what going out of the euro does. Now, I'm going to be talking about 2 points. I'll try and make them funny since I have to, keep up to the standard of the first speech. First of all, how tyrannical kind of democracies protect more people better than a philosophical dictator. So really how we're better under an ugly, clever guy, who can, express our voices than we are under a dictatorship. And secondly, how we can progress better through discourse. So first of all, we just want to say that there's no real such thing as a social philosophy, right? Without, social philosophical truth which emerges without discourse, right? And we think that it's ironic that no one really wants Tsipras, and he's about to have he's about to bring in the first party. And we think that's very problematic because we think that he has the capacity, essentially, as was brought up in a point of information, to essentially bring back Greece, to really bring back Greece, to unseen levels of poverty. Because we heard all this, woof-woof about how we can default and have good exports, but this is probably going to be my only economic argument today. The fact of the matter is, if you go back to the drachma, then you can't import stuff, right? Because you have to export stuff in order to get dollars to be able to buy stuff from America in dollars or from China in yuan, right? Because no one wants to have the Greek drachma, it's a non-convertible currency. And as much as we like olive oil and feta cheese, we think that's not enough to actually prop up the Greek economy, right? So we think that everything about cheaper goods and whatever is not enough to actually guarantee that you can import stuff, right? So if you can't import, you really can't live, right? Because Tsipras and his followers can't have nice suits and so forth because Greece doesn't make nice suits, right? So essentially what happens is you deteriorate into a culture of not being able to purchase superior products out of your olive oil exports. Now, on the other hand, on a tyrannical democracy, which is kind of the majority, what does everyone want at the expense of some people, we think that essentially you can protect people better, through discourse. You have the ability to talk and kind of pick your battles in order to reach a sort of consensus. But at the same time, you don't really hurt minorities. You don't hurt the kinds of people who are a bit out of the mainstream, the kind of people who don't like Tsipras, even though he's good looking, right? We think a good example is kind of like the gay community and the green community, even though they're completely different. There's obviously some green people who are gay and some gay people who are green. And we think that this kind of this kind of cross-cutting between communities is a very tangible reason as to why they won't annihilate each other. Okay, that was my first point. And let's now move on to the second point about better progress through discourse. Now, we all love the internet, and because we can browse hot pictures of people on the internet. But the internet also has some other, beautiful capabilities. You can talk to people on Facebook, and you can talk to people on forums, and you can talk about your problems and what you like, and your wants, and your needs, and your suits, and your preferences. And we think that this is what's so great about a democracy, even if more people have a say, even if it is completely majoritarian. We think that giving people so much freedom, to talk. I'll take you a second, yes, please. Giving people the freedom to talk is what it's all about, so that way you can really express your views about who you want and who you don't. Go.
Okay, I know you're really into chicks from the internet, but can you please tell us how the hell Greece is going to get out of the rut that it's in with massive budget deficits and the destruction of the whole Greek society?
Okay, so on a more serious note, on a more serious note, we think, we just got probably the biggest bailout ever, right? Right. So they just gave us a lot of money. We think that's perfectly fine to service ourselves in the short term. We think in the long term, you know, all these structural reforms are good. If not, we think that once, you know, Europe kind of gets out of this entire contagion thing, just borrow more money at lower interest rates. We don't think this is that big a problem. So essentially, even though that's not ideal, it's hardly optimal, it's far better than reverting to the drachma and not being able to purchase anything except for olive oil, because you need other stuff as well. Yes?
We just got the biggest bailout ever for the third or fourth time, right? What is going to change now? What is different now? Despite the fact that we got a lot of money, how are you going to ensure they're going to be effectively used?
Well, I think a very interesting aspect of direct democracy and majoritarianism is the fact that the people can have a say, right? And we think that it's the people of Greece who really know where, you know, the money should be allocated to, not some sort of Tsipras guy who, you know, just doesn't know anything. I mean, we think that people can successfully debate on the internet, you know, we like that. They can kind of decide for themselves. I mean, on the plus side, you said, we have 4 bailouts, come on guys, we can pay our debts, well, it's okay, we'll just get a 5th one. I mean, that means we can still continue this, like, downward cycle. Who cares, I mean? Yeah. So at the end of the day, exploit fewer people, progress, discourse, you know, and come on, clever guys always win. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Saris, for that rather funny speech. You lived up to expectations. Now, calling on the second half of the opening government, one moment, Mr. John, please,
Well, we weren't very much surprised that Mr. Saris is not very affected by looks, so it's not his thing mainly. But Mr. Lekas, I can't see how Mr. Lekas will oppose our thing. It's all about looks, guys. I mean, this guy has won everything and he knows nothing. I mean, he mind fucks people with nice English, like Tsipras with not so nice English, and they're both really hard. That's my intro. So, I am going to discuss the moral basis of what we're saying, which will be a challenge, I think. But before that, I will rebut what we're saying and what they're saying, which will also be quite a challenge. Now, well, on foreign policy, Tsipras can mindfuck other leaders, for example, with his English and the whole concept of double thing. And even if that doesn't happen, as Evans pointed out, Madame Merkel hasn't had sex. And, for example, being called Madame Merkel by Tsipras is probably the most erotic thing anyone has ever told her. So, obviously, the next day we'll have Eurobonds, we'll have a renegotiation of the bailout terms. We'll probably delete the debt, although that's an idea patented by Coucouet, so we should give them credit as well. Now, onto a more serious note. We spoke of how there is actual concrete benefit to reverting to the drachma. You can devalue it, you can increase your exports, and the argument by Mr. says that you can't have international currency this way. Well, of course, this has happened before, and not every country that doesn't have an international currency, that doesn't mean that they can't have exports and they can't have imports, and mainly, Tsipras, ladies and gentlemen, has proposed everything. I mean, he has proposed staying in the euros, going out of the euro, so we don't see why they're mutually exclusive in this way. And as Mr. Sadi said, Greece has olive oil, it doesn't have nice suits to sell. And look at him. That's not the nice suit. We couldn't sell that. Only he would buy it, obviously. And then he had the point about gay green people, which was slightly incomprehensible. I don't know where you hang out and find gay green people, but still. And then they said that we need the internet to browse hot pictures and everything. But you can watch Tsipras all day. Why browse the internet for hot pictures of people? I really don't get it. Now, onto my own constructive case about the moral basis, which will be slightly more serious than the rebuttal, which was serious enough, obviously. Well, decision making under a plan of a philosopher king, a philosopher dictator, does not indeed stem from the expressed will of the people. But if the will of the people is not ill-guided, well, this means that it probably will coincide with the decision that the philosopher dictator will make. So this is good, because we have a good decision made.
Sir.
No, thank you, sir. If the will of the people is not very carefully allocated, as we see in the polls that have Mr. Tsipras been in that position and have KCLG and all those parties been in this position in the Greek political system, well, then we think that the better decision is the fundamental basis that justifies a plan like ours. We think that democracy is justified only when it means better life standards, better decisions for the people. It's not justified just as a fluffy concept that we like, because we all get to say what we think we should say. And the point is that a tyrannical democracy is basically majoritarianism, and this is something that is not democratic under the standards of a modern society as we think. So this uncontrolled democracy, majoritarianism, is not compatible with the constitutional republics, which are the modern trend. So tyrannical democracy is, as the first word says, a tyranny, basically, and where the majority can legislate and decide anything for anyone, even minorities who have no say and cannot be represented and can never form a majority that will be deciding anything in a parliament. No, thank you, sir. Well, this is something unacceptable, and this is what we're comparing today. We're comparing a tyrannical democracy, which would be a model like the one I described, versus a philosopher king, who would be a person like Tsipras, obviously, who would respect minorities as well, and would be much closer to a constitutional republic and not just a tyrannical democracy and majoritarianism. No, thanks, sir. Now, by having Mr. Tsipras in our leadership, we could show his true colors, and some of us may think he's great, others for some reason may think he's not that great. And by allowing Mr. Tsipras to form a government or be a dictator and be the minister of everything as well, we will see his true colors and be rational. And at the end of the day, we will be rational and furthermore decide better. For example, next time we'll vote for Kukwe, everyone. So this is, and not just, I mean, it's not just communists, it's Stalinist, so it's even better. And this is what Greek people have done and will keep doing, because Greek people will know how to find a way out. And we think that even if team opposition disagrees with our basic principle of Mr. Tsipras, we would probably still be fine with Mrs. Papariga and her plan of deleting the debt, which basically makes huge sense. You would no longer have debt and all would be fine. Now, onto another level, we have all those problems right now, such as cash withdrawals, which remove liquidity from our economy, etc., etc. And a democratic government can do very little about those things, because political speech doesn't solve anything. And if a democratic government were to take such measures, it would be such measures as such as freezing withdrawals, etc. It would be criticized as removing freedoms. But what we're having right now, by having freedom in every transaction, which is harmful for our own economy, we have a self-fulfilling prophecy. And a strong administration would take the measures that are deemed necessary to stop this madness. And on a funnier note, because I think this has gone far too serious today, it is indeed a conviction that we have that Mr. Tsipras, as I said, will be an excellent leader. But even if he's not, even if that's not the case, what we showed you and what we believe in is that finally he or anyone else will be judged, and we will have a restored democracy. We will not have a democracy that will be harmed by the crisis. We will have Mr. Tsipras that will be harmed by the crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paramisiadis, for that wonderful speech. Now calling on Mr. Lekas to continue this
I'd like to begin by begging the Motions Committee and everyone involved in organizing to please never let university debaters ever come back and compete. Please, don't let me come back and do this again. Don't let Alex do this again. Okay, now, I'm not funny, but apparently it doesn't matter. I just stand here and smile and wave, which is great. So what I'm going to do in my speech is just integrate rebuttal throughout and then play with my hair. But so starting with this idea of whether default is good. Now we got this ridiculous idea that if we have Mr. Tsipras running the country, he will take the responsible decisions necessary for really making sure we have fiscal growth, that we have people living happy lives. We don't think so. We don't think he's particularly qualified to make responsible decisions. We think you look at his agenda, it's like hire everyone, right? It's like if you look at Greek tourism, like in the 10 years between 1990 and the ascension to the euro, the market doubled and it's Greece's share halved. He wouldn't fire the people who are responsible for those kinds of decisions. We don't think that's the kind of economy, no thank you, you want to live in. That means you have less disposable income. That means this guy's making all these decisions for you, and that's pretty horrible. You had a point that didn't weigh you down. Anyways, okay. Sit down anyway. Okay, great. So, now, the other problem is that if you default, what's going to happen is you're going to get kicked out of the EU. If you get kicked out of the EU, you lose the one thing that might have saved you, which is EU structural development funds and loans and things like that. Don't get any money from the European Investment Bank if you exit the EU, right? That means that the only hope for development is thereby lost. Yeah.
So, please inform the House of your other nationality and whether you're actually standing up for Greece or Germany.
Oh, I think you've done that for me, Mr. Alex Evans. Mr. Evans, I repeat, where is your nationality? I think your agenda is pretty clear. You're a stooge for the Americans, and I think we should just get you removed. Now, if someone wants to do that for me. Alrighty. The long-term benefit. Great. So apparently we're told Greece needs to devaluate its currency so it can export things. Export goods for the world that it needs, like cheese, which apparently like the Israelis can make better than we can. I mean, it's pretty unfortunate, but we agree it'd probably be cool if people did devaluate their currency. We think people know that too, and a tyrannical democracy would do that too. No problem with that, right? Like, there's no reason to believe that 8 people sitting in this beautiful amphitheater can't come up with these brilliant ideas, and that everyone else in the world, everyone else in the country can't do the same and just vote for them. We think that's why all the benefits they get are much greater on our side. Why? Because you don't have the risk of Mr. Tsipras actually following through on everything he promises, which is total insanity. And like hiring every single person in Greece, like making it illegal to like get private employment, like all these crazy kinds of policies I'm sure he would love nothing but to implement. So, given that, we think it's not in our long-term interests. Yes.
If he's that insane, wouldn't it be better to expose him and actually make people realize that he is insane so that they don't elect such people in the future?
So here's the beauty. If we just have a referendum, there's no need to, right? It's like there's no need to expose himself as a crazy person. You haven't got a government that you constantly have to hold accountable. You have to hold yourselves accountable. You suffer the consequences directly. There's no indirect mechanism of, do we vote for the guy again in 4 years, do we not, blah, blah, blah. It's literally like, I made a dumb decision, now I pay for it. And then I make better decisions in the long run. So all these things about, like, maybe we can hold him accountable mean nothing in the context of a democracy, which is our opposition, apparently. So, yeah. Okay, let's continue with our own case. We had some interesting things that we prepped out. No, sorry, come back in like a minute or something. So, no, first of all, we don't think there's such thing as a philosophical dictatorship. Like, what does that mean? Like, where's this abstract truth that he promises he has unique access to, right? He isn't like a priest, he doesn't claim contact with the divine. We think that truth emerges democratically, right? There is no such thing as, like even utility maximizing. There's different ways you can maximize utility. There's different ways you can distribute utility. There's different things that you consider other than utility. All of those things don't just exist in some other sphere, even though you guys are pretty platonic. They don't exist somewhere where you just like pick them out and like make them happen. They emerge through discourse. And if you want to have emerge through discourse, yes, you have to have a conversation. Tsipras does not like having conversations. Yes.
You said that there is an abstract truth, and this is also true, but Mr. Tsipras has proposed practically everything, so.
You're right, guys. Great. Okay, perfect. Like, I can't continue that, like, honestly. Okay, second point. Like, why tyrannical democracies won't be genocidal. And that was our point. Why? Because sometimes you have people who like the environmental movement, and sometimes you like people who are gay, and sometimes you like people who are Swiss, and sometimes you like people who exist across a lot of different communities. There are very rarely situations in which you have communities being split along super clear ethnic majoritarian lines such that the consequences are such that you can vote in a way which literally does harm to everyone. Because you're so connected across different ways and different people, every decision you make as a person in a democratic society does end up considering most people. That's why you think referendums are good people, are good things, they're not good people. Whereas, like, we think that there are real parties in Greece that are pretty genocidal. Like, I'm surprised. Alex is like very much like a go hard or go home kind of guy. Why didn't he go straight to Mispamarira, right? Like, you could have had your Stalinist dictatorship immediately, but you want to go the soft way. Sure.
One, we told you because she's ugly. But secondly, you said truth is distributed by the people. Don't you think it should be distributed equitably by a communist state that distributes these opinions fairly among all individuals?
Here's the deal, Alex. Someone who called your shirt red when it was clearly coral just does not know what taste is. Like, just look at it. It's like a tomato color. It's nowhere near very okay. So, basically, our proposition is, if people want to be stupid, let them be stupid, let them suffer the consequences of those stupid decisions, and then we'll laugh, and then we'll leave, and they'll take our money out. But in the long run, people learn, and because they keep on voting and making good decisions, they'll end up learning, and people will be much happier. People will, like, depreciate their own currency or do whatever they need to. And that, we think, is Greece's bright, shining, glorious future. And we're here to stand for it. If that means having to pass on a leader as beautiful and as talented as Mr. Tsipras, we'll take that decision because I think Greece is much more attractive to Mrs. Merkel. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Legas, for that wonderful speech. Now calling on Mrs. Eustachiou to open the side for closing government, whenever you're ready.
We believe that the opening government has done an extremely good job at explaining how Tsipras is an exceptional leader. And if we agree 100% that he's the best leader and very hot, we will tell you that even if we agree with the logic of the opposition, even if we give the benefit of the doubt to the opposition, Tsipras will again benefit the country again in the long term. And I will provide you with the mechanisms of how this will be done. But before I do so, please let me rebut some main points raised by the opposition. They said, first of all, that if we get out of the Eurozone, we can't import or export goods. Ladies and gentlemen, A, we think that they didn't talk about the harm that staying in the Eurozone does to our banks, and B, we think that getting out of the Eurozone will attract other customers, such as China, Russia, India, and other markets. Second of all, they said that we have the biggest bailout right now, and we might actually get out of crisis. But, ladies and gentlemen, again, two responses. A, we already got so many bailouts, and nothing happened. So they never explained how this bailout will actually, right now will benefit and bring and change the country. And second of all, no thank you. We believe that Europe has made very clear that this was the last bailout, and therefore they said that they actually threatened Greece of getting kicked out of the Eurozone. So again, we say that it's time to do it ourselves and actually, no thank you, make Tsipras a very good dictator. And they also said that Tsipras is not qualified in making responsible decisions. Again, two responses. A, they said that how the government takes response. We say that right now they say that the government takes responsible decisions. And I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, one simple question. Look at the situation that we are in now. We do not think that the government right now takes responsible decisions. We only think that Tsipras is the one who takes responsible decisions. And with B, let's give again the benefit of the doubt to the opposition. And let's say that he's not a good leader or very hot. Ladies and gentlemen, and I will analyze that, in my case, how this will again benefit Greece by informing the population that he's a crazy person, as you mentioned, and it will make society actually learn not to vote for him again or for such other leaders. And lastly, no thank you, they said about leaving it to democracy to elect Tsipras. But, ladies and gentlemen, we can clearly see how Greece is in the middle of a very big social crisis, where the Greek society is more divided than ever, and we think that the only solution is to make Tsipras a dictator. So, moving on to my constructive case, where I will analyze how even if we give the benefit of the doubt to the opposition, and let's say that Tsipras is not a very good leader, we will again benefit the country in the long run. So we say that even if we accept the opposition's idea that Tsipras and such leaders are detrimental for a country, we say that this is going to benefit the country in the long term. And how this will be done? In three main areas. Ladies and gentlemen, we say that populist politicians will be undermined. Second of all, we say that votes of anger will be reduced. And third of all, we say that Greece can be reborn better and stronger. So, to my first point, how populist politicians will be undermined. Ladies and gentlemen, if we accept the opposition's logic that Tsipras is capitalizing on people's anger and gives empty promises, we accept that the country will get into a downfall. And in the long term, ladies and gentlemen, people themselves will realize that populist leaders aren't the solution to the country. And let's take the example of Laos and Karadziaferis, no thank you, where he gave them empty promises and actually, at the end of the day, entered the coalition government. But right now, he's left out of the government. The Greek population has understood the harms that his empty promises gave to the country, and actually informed the Greek population about the harms of these leaders. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the short term, we think that the negative consequences are cathartic for society, because A, we believe that because people will never vote for him in no thank you in elections or demonstrations, and B, because they will never elect a populist politician in the future, even if the oppositions will say it's true. Everything, and based on everything that the opposition say it's true. And B, ladies and gentlemen, moving to my second point, how we reduce the votes of anger. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if we buy what the opposition says, and that people vote in him because of anger, and that will again see the destructive consequences of electing Tsipras. No, thank you. In the future, much more likely, and in the future what we'll see is the population will be much more likely not to vote for this politician again. And so Χρυσή Αυγή or Kamenos that actually claims that we are sprayed with chemicals will not be elected, as people will vote on the basis of reason and not anger. And moving on to my third and last point, no thank you, of how Greece can be reborn better and stronger. Ladies and gentlemen, we understand that the opposition says that might be true, that Greece's default will have tremendous consequences in the short term, and that this is a certain generation that will suffer eternally. We say that 24, 25-year-olds might suffer eternally by not having by finding a job very difficultly in the future. But, ladies and gentlemen, we say that because, no thank you, because of the nature of the Greece's society and economy, we say that Greece can be reborn stronger and better. And why is that, ladies and gentlemen? Because it is a shallow economy. It is based on services such as tourism, export, imports, etc. So we say that this kind of economy is an economy that can be easily regenerated, and in the long run can enable Greece to become much better and stronger. No thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I've done in my speech today, I have what has Team Government did generally. We provided you with how Tsipras is actually a very good leader, but also we proved to you how, if we do again what the opposition says, and if we say that Tsipras will have negative consequences on Greece, we again benefit Greece in the long term. So for all these reasons, we beg back to propose the motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Estafilou, for that wonderful speech. Now calling on Mrs. Marilia, who would like to open the case for closing opposition.
Okay. Before I start, I gotta say that when we talked about this 5 minutes before prep, we decided it would be 50% joke. So we thought we were gonna be a bit more serious. So anyway, what we're saying today, ladies and gentlemen, is that they want Tsipras to be the eternal dictator of Greece, which is probably going to be the scenario that goes on after the elections anyway, but let's just talk about it a bit. We're saying that we want majoritarian, tyrannical democracy. basically we want anything that isn't Tsipras, but we'll settle for majoritarian tyrannical democracy. Like, basically in our speech we're going to talk to you about the international consequences of having Tsipras as dictator, both short-term and long-term, because we're feeling a bit ambitious. But before we do move on to that, let's talk a bit about what's been brought up by the opposition today, which was wonderful, and I was so happy to hear it. Okay, right. We heard about how hot Tsipras is, which is undisputable. I am the first person to admit that I almost voted for him myself. However, like, it's a bit interesting to be proposing, I mean, apart from your latent gay tendencies, Alex, it's a bit interesting to be proposing a guy who, upon being asked, like, what are you going to do to improve the economy, said, which, you know, is a good plan, admittedly. I will stun everyone into sort of agreeing with me. But it doesn't say much, really, no. But it doesn't say much in terms of his ability to sort of actually go through with anything, no. Interestingly, apart from that, have you seen his 5-point plan of economic recovery? I mean, which is basically termed number 1, good economy, number 2, recovery. Apart from the fact that it's complete bullshit, there are substantial faults with it. And also, the plan, you really want to speak, don't you? Yes, let's hear the sound of your voice again. Why not?
Which one of these two do you actually disagree with? Also, what happened in the Terminator movies when someone says, I'm going to deal with it?
I have no answer to that. I will say that if you got the Terminator, I would make him dictator as well. I will say though that in a rare point of seriousness, that the 5-point economic plan that Tsipras has is absolutely horrible. I think it is the worst economic plan, worse than if you made me make an economic plan, which is a lot. Anyway, so we heard this in-depth analysis by Alex about how defaulting on your debt will in the short term mean that you don't have debt, which was fantastic. Which was, you know, this is what they teach you in Virginia, this is so cool. Anyway, so yeah, apart from that and analyzing, we also heard that we're going to devalue the currency. What currency? I mean, when you say that you're going to, that you're bankrupt, it's estimated it's going to take 6 months for the drachma to be issued. So your currency would be cows, your coral shirt, something like that in general. Anyway, so you have 6 months of utter chaos, which is okay because people can look at Tsipras and be like, oh, this is so great. But still, it is 6 months of chaos. And, you know, in all seriousness, it's not that easy to just say that a leader, no matter how capable he is, can simply, no thank you, can simply drag a country out of a recession by virtue of being hot and wanting economic recovery. However, recovery in terms of economy, that economic recovery will be. No. Anyway, so we also heard that democracy is justified and is that we only have a democracy as long as it ensures people's well-being. But have you been living in this country for long? I mean, democracy has ensured what I know. Democracy has ensured what well-being. Also, like, what would? Can I have time out of curiosity? Yeah, thanks. No. Also, like, what would be the difference between a tyrannical democracy and Tsipras, essentially? I mean, if you accept that about 30% of the population is already going to be voting for Tsipras anyway, you will see that they're pretty stupid by themselves. So we say that if the status quo is stupidity, you might as well let that stupidity be expressed in a free environment. Notwithstanding the fact that he is quite hot, which is, I think, the major concession that Op has made in this debate. Also, fine, yes.
So, lots of dictators, namely Mussolini, made statues of themselves and gave topless speeches on balconies. Isn't that an incredible benefit that you can have to concede outside the house?
I will give you a counter prop. I will put a naked statue of Tsipras on your balcony. And then I am going to have my tyrannical majoritarian democracy, whatever. Something not Tsipras anyway. Move on. Anyway, so on a side note, on a side note of seriousness, we say that essentially A tyrannical democracy implies that you have lost all confidence in your people, and although we do live in Greece, and if you do consider that these 8 people are the elite of this sort of Athens in debating, it's quite funny. But anyway, I mean, you can't lose all confidence in the people, and I mean, it's quite a huge step to sort of go back and say that you are going to have a tyrannical dictator, much less if that guy is Tsipras, who is probably going to lose all of his support in the space of like the next 2 months. Anyway, so moving on to our constructive case. Yeah, to that thing that is going to be my constructive case. The international consequences of having Tsipras as a dictator. Look, I mean, did you see Tsipras on CNN? I mean, not that it wasn't fantastic to hear that he doesn't want to exit Eurozone and that he likes the Europe, but I mean, internationally speaking, it's not that good to have a person who is decidedly horrible at everything apart from looking good on an international perspective. And I mean, like, you don't want the international community to think that the Greek people are incapable of electing a leader. You don't want the international community to think that Greece is basically doomed to the extent of needing Tsipras as a dictator. No. Yeah. So anyways, this essentially what you're saying is that this dictatorship will immediately make the international community lose confidence in Greece. We are already at a CCC credit rating, so we don't need more loss of confidence. What we're saying is basically that, you know, if the Greek community wants to be... Oh, done? Oh, cool. If the Greek community wants to be a joke, it can be a joke by itself. It doesn't need Tsipras. It doesn't need to lose completely its liberty over it. And for God's sake, this is the worst debate of my life. Bye.
Now calling on Mr. Safir to summarize the side of the government.
Mr. Speaker, after hearing everything that was mentioned today, I kind of changed my mind. Tsipras isn't the one that actually told the truth, it's Mr. Kamenos. We're all clearly sprayed by the Americans. The things we've said are absolutely insane. I literally checked the clouds and was like, where is it? Because I can't see it. Anyway, it's too late for a case shift, so I'm going to go ahead and still agree that Tsipras is the best choice. I'm going to summarize this debate in 4 main questions. First of all, is making Tsipras a dictator necessary? Secondly, is it better for the international community? Thirdly, is he hot? And fourthly, even if he sucks, who benefits the country in the long-term war? All answers are going to be in favor of Team Proposition, of course. First of all, is making Tsipras a dictator necessary? Team Proposition clearly said it definitely is, right? First of all, he's incredibly hot. He's going to, smooch with the European community with his Terminator accent. We think that's going to be great. Secondly, we say he's going to get us out of the downfall of the memorandum, right? That was very clearly talked about by the opening government team. We say, I've personally been out of this country for 6 months. Last week I went to the Leki, I saw the prices of tomatoes, they were horrible. We tasted the food today, the quality of food is being horrible, right? The country's in a downfall. But in a serious note, actually, we said that all this effort we've been putting into this has actually given us nothing, right? People are still even more unemployed. We say our economy sucks more than it has ever before. We say nothing's going to change, we're literally in a downfall. So we don't think that any sort of European-friendly government is going to do anything rather than humiliate us even more. No, thank you. The last thing we already talked to you about is the fact that getting the money out of the country, right, which is what's happening right now, is very hard for the economy. We say the fact that we might actually default in the future is harming Greek banks. We talked to you about how we want to prevent that, hence we should go to the drachma. Right now, we should vote Tsipras. Now, the opposition simply told us, well, the drachma is a weak currency. Here's the solution. Make it a strong currency. Print Tsipras' face in different poses in the actual currency. This is going to clearly make it the stronger currency that it's out there. But on another note, we also told you that if we actually have this weak currency, we're going to attract other economies, right? We're going to open up to Russia and India and China and all these alternative economies, which we think is great. The last thing we heard about is that we should let the democratic discourse decide, right? They seem to think that we should let people decide. In a country where no clear party can be determined right now, in the most divided elections in the history of modern Greece, right? When Chrysia Vie is getting about 7% of the vote, we clearly see that democracy is failing. We clearly see that we can't live it out with other people. We need someone to govern us. We finally need someone who's hot. We think that Tsipras is necessary. Now the second point of contention, whether it's better for the international community. Basically, Marieli's extension was that he has a bad accent, right? That was the only thing we heard. 2 points of refutation. we think that's a good thing, right? Why should English be the prevailing language? Adam, do you just study right? See, okay. We clearly think this is a very, very good trend in the international community, and this clearly shows this sort of opposition to this Anglo-Saxonic prevalence in international relations, right? The fact that English and French should be the only language out there, we think is a bad thing. So we think that actually having this voice is going to benefit the international community. The second thing, which Yannia touched upon, is the fact that, you know, Europe's probably going to kick us out anyway, right? So the international community has turned their back on us. It's time that we slap Europe in the face and say, you know what? We're going to take a little democracy on our Parthenon and be out of this Eurozone, out of the European Union. Be jealous, guys. You can't have us anymore. We think that that's actually going to benefit the international community, and that's actually going to be a leverage that we can use to benefit our economy and improve diplomacy. Yes, Alex?
Speaking of leverages, if we fail...
Microphone.
Speaking of leverages, if we fail, people throughout Europe and the world will be putting like cauliflower oil on their salad, and it's going to taste really, really bad. So why don't we just say, we won't give you oil unless you bail us out?
So what we'll do is we'll cover Tsipras in Greek olive oil and project into the international community. People who clearly appreciate olive oil and will import it then. Third area of contention, is Tsipras hot? Yes, we all agree. Fourth area of contention, even if Tsipras sucks, who benefits the country in the long term, right? Because we gave you an excellent case extension. We told you we are willing to accept that he might suck. What is going to happen in the future? We gave you three main analyses, none of which was responded by Marilia. First of all, we told you that we're going to expose this sort of populist leaders, right? These sort of populist leaders will be undermined. If Nick Sirleaf comes back 20 years later and says, I'm going to be your, I'm going to be your prime minister, we're all going to say, Masarafili, you're just like Tsipras, right? So that's what's going to happen in the future. These sort of populist leaders, this culture that has been increased for ages, since the time of Andreas Papandreou, will actually finally end. We say this is going to benefit governments, the Greek government, in the future. The second thing we say we're going to see is we're not going to have any more angry votes, right? We have people who are insane in these elections. We're voting for extreme parties. We said that if Tsipras actually proves to be as bad as the opposition tells us that he is, we're willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. We say if he clearly is that bad, then people will realize that and will never actually have these sort of angry votes, rationalist debate, and actually think about their votes much more. The last point of contention we give you there is the fact that Greece is a very special case, right? We say that we can recover very, very easily and we can have a very, very strong economy. Why is this? Evgenia clearly told you that the Greek economy is a shallow economy. It's a service-based economy. It means that it can be reborn very, very easily. We say tourism can actually be sparked very, very easily. It doesn't need, it's labor intensive, it can create new opportunities. So we say even if in the short term defaulting might, and if we follow what the opposition say, might.
All I'm going to say, I'm probably going to end about 6 minutes early, given the fact that Ms. Kalina hasn't written a note since Evan's second sentence. I haven't written a note since Evan's first sentence. I don't really know what the hell I'm going to talk about, and I don't know how the hell I'm going to be summarizing this debate. But because of that, and because Tato Kanoniso isn't really good enough for us, we beg to oppose this motion. Now, I'm going to basically look at this debate under the two main areas under which there was any kind of constructive development. The first is, what are the actual economic implications? And the second is, what is the morality or the philosophy involved in this debate? Because, I mean, two of the most recurring themes throughout this debate was whether he's good looking, to which we all agreed, and whether Evan's shirt is actually coral or not, and what it actually means. I don't know. But let's go to the first point, ladies and gentlemen, and let's talk about the economy. And what the first thing that Mr. Evans came up and told us is that, well, actually you need someone good looking to booster the economy and to bolster the economy. And you need someone good looking especially because Madame Merkel hasn't had sex in a long time. To which we fundamentally oppose this, and we think that they've opposed this themselves, ladies and gentlemen, because someone has raped the Greek economy, and we don't know who else to point our finger to. And we've conceded that throughout this debate. We accept that the Greek democracies haven't been good so far, but that's on the second point, on the philosophy of this debate. Now, what we're actually going to talk about in the economy is basically there was not much to talk about because the whole economic point was brought up in Mr. Evans' speech. And I think his focus on attractiveness probably just proves the fact that he spends most of the time in front of a mirror and hasn't read a single article about the euro or about the eurozone in the past 2 years, and probably hasn't paid attention to Economics 101. But
given what Nick Evstathiou said and you haven't yet responded to, that Europe has turned its back on Greece, and given also Mr. Hollande's dubious sexual identity, given the fact that he's not married with the woman he's with, what do you think would happen if Mr. Tsipras turned his beautiful back on Europe?
I mean, given our consent of the fact that he's good looking, I think there would be general disagreement and disapproval, and probably a lot of sadness. But we think, ladies and gentlemen, that on a whole, we think that it's probably better that Mr. Tsipras turns his back. It's probably better that we all turn our back on Mr. Tsipras, simply because he hasn't proven to us that he can actually benefit. He hasn't proven to us anything, and we don't think that the Eurozone will benefit by looking at his face. If they want to, ladies and gentlemen, they can just take a picture. Yes, sir.
Other than Phil's worrying preoccupation with man boobs, what is your actual response to our extension that is going to be better for Greece in the long term?
Okay, well, I'm going to look at that extension later on. I'm going to look at that extension. Well, I'm not going to lie, I didn't actually note anything down, so I don't know what your extension actually was. I'm going to make something up for you and talk about it towards the end of this economic point. So, Evan's whole economic analysis, I've had enough, thank you. Evan's whole economic analysis was basically that if you default, then your budget deficit decreases, which is probably the most obvious correlation anyone could ever have come up with. But what we think, ladies and gentlemen, is that that's not essentially a very good thing, because it means that you can't essentially that in the future, especially when you want your economy to start regrowth and you want international cooperation, then no one's going to be willing to give you loans, because Mr. Tsipras told you about 2 months ago that he wanted to take your signatures off the memorandum and didn't want to be part of it after people had signed it. We don't think that develops trust on a worldwide basis. We think on the second point, no thank you, we think that on the second point, their idea of devalued currency doesn't really make much sense. I mean, I'm not an economist, I haven't studied economics. So I'm relying on every economic article I've read, which is probably like one. I've understood half of it. And all those have said that you can't devalue, that defaulting from the euro and adopting the drachma is not essentially a good policy. I'm going to trust them. I mean, they have a lot more experience than I do, so I can't really say anything to that extent. Yes, sir.
Nick said that Greece is Greece.
Let's go on to the second point, ladies and gentlemen, which is actually a little more interesting, because on the idea of philosophy, we had this whole development of the idea of who Tsipras is and what he did.
Go take Nick's soup or whatever. It's actually made in Greece.
It's actually made in Greece.
Check the boss label.
Where is he?
Hey, what's up?
Okay, I need proof that your suit is actually Greek.
Look at this. Δοκιμασμένη ποιότητα και τέλεια εφαρμογή. Look at that cut, come on.
What are the odds?
Και αν μπορούμε να προσθέσουμε κάτι στο plan too late, αλλά αυτό θα ήταν και το slogan του κόμματος μου.
Ναι, βασικό.
Δοκιμασμένη ποιότητα και τέλεια εφαρμογή.
The read it ended. It will not be another.
Oh my god!
So, we voted. It was difficult. It was difficult because we didn't know what we were voting for. But that voting was a unanimous kind of voting. We did unanimously agree that it was ridiculously funny. It was great. We did also agree that it was excessively a bit too heavy on the swearing. We did think that, you know, the same thing could have been said with a little less fuck in it. There I go again. But in the end of the day, after carefully discussing this, looking over and over again, deciding who made the better jokes, and deciding that the person that made the worst jokes is probably the one that's probably a bit more serious during this debate, we decided to give first place to opening opposition. Congratulations. And there's a good reason why, because unanimously we felt that they brought the only legit argument that was not about being funny in this debate. And that was great, you know, we really appreciate it. But we also appreciate, I mean, I haven't laughed this much in a debate since I saw a bunch of drunk Irishmen up at Durham debating between themselves. So that says a lot. Congratulations, guys. Congratulations to all the teams. This was a very difficult decision. We didn't know what to do. The argument was, now prepare yourselves for this. The argument was that Greeks can make a fool of themselves via democracy without the need of having a dictator in the first place. And that kind of takes it alone. And that should say a lot about the rest of the arguments in this debate. So, congratulations. I'd like to have you guys up here so you can come and take your awards. But before you do that, I want to congratulate the judges in the final. I'm looking for you guys. Congratulations for going through this with a clean, straight mind and still being able to decide that fuck was a bad word to be used over and over again. I didn't think anyone had the power after this to say anything negative of this debate, but congratulations, it was great, and it was a great thing judging with you guys, because I couldn't do this alone at all. Having said that, thank you all for coming, but before we do that, can I have the teams up here so they can take their awards? Do you have that paper with the novice speaker on? Because we found a novice speaker.
It's only because he's hot, guys. For the rest of you, congratulations, you novice speaker. What is this? Just bought it for like 6 last tournaments. Oh, wait. They made the biggest one. Size doesn't matter, man.
Okay, so this is for the novice.
I'd like to thank my mom. Everyone who told me this was possible.
Pretty. No.
You also get a plate.
Shadow. Alright, now, alright, this is an interesting one. Alright, so today's tournament's novice speaker is Mr. Romanos Kapelis from Kosteas Gidonas. Representative from Kosteas Gidonas to pick up this giant trophy for the novice speaker. Congratulations.
Please.
Can you guys hear me? Is this Ancient Greek theater working correctly?
No.
Alright.
Not really.
So, for the best speakers of this tournament, in no particular order, I'm kidding, it's going from 10th all the way to 1st. 10th place goes to Mr. Memoskatis on a total of a whopping 367 points. On number 9, we've got Mr. Paradisias Yanis with Tsipras. Congratulations. On number 8, we've got Mr. Nick Moschopoulos. Congratulations. On number 7, we've got Christiana Papadakis. On number 6, we have Mr. Nick Saris. On number 5, we have Mrs. Marilia Gugulaiti. Now, correct me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, but at number 4 we have Miss Amy Nowden. Is that correct? Naughty? All right, Mrs. Amy Naughty. On number 3 we have Mr. Evans Alex with Tsipras. And interesting enough, on number 1 and on number 2, we have a tie. So I don't quite know what we do in this case. This has never happened before. Should we have an impromptu debate and we can give him 1 point and we decide who gets it?
Yeah.
So I'll say who's who. Mr. Nick of Stathiou, Mr. Phil Lekas tie on a whopping 379 points. Now, should you guys decide who's the more beautiful one of the two and then give him the point? I don't know. What do we do? Do I just give it to the both of them and they share it forever?
Fight to the death.
Alright, we're going to bring some mud and... No, I'm kidding. Alright, so can I have then Mr. Nick of Stathiou come up here? Alright. Congratulations to the both of you. You will forever be friends. Ending this, I wish we had more important speakers than myself, but you're stuck with me. So what I'm going to tell you is, thank you all for making this very small tournament a ridiculously fun, enjoyable tournament. I highly enjoyed it. I think we all highly enjoyed organizing it. The speeches were amazing. We had a lot of young debaters, a lot of debaters that I've personally never seen debate before, and I think everyone did a great job. The judges were very patient. The judges were extremely patient during the last round now. I hope you enjoyed the motions. They were picked last night. And I think some of you could tell. Other than that, I hope the food was good. It's the same food that we have every year. And I hope to see a lot of you again next year, except for you guys again. You should go and do something else. Go away. I thought we dealt with this 2 years ago. But congratulations, nevertheless. So, I do invite you for the Champions League final. I don't support any team. But then again, I didn't support many of these guys too, but I still had to vote. So congratulations and thank you for coming. This was great.